Hello. Check, check. Check, check. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Switch. Check. 1, 2, 3, 2, 1. Switch. You should be seeing the camera. Camera live. And then 3, 2, 1. Switch.
afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. We're about ready to get started. Well, gee, I've never had so much power in my life. Good afternoon and welcome to our summer dialogue. Today, my name is Andrea Kelton Harris, and I'm so pleased to welcome so many of you to today's dialogue on transgender inclusion in the workplace. Before I go any further, we do have an overflow room, so if you can't find a seat in here, there is an overflow room, and a shout out to our overflow room. The topic today that we plan to discuss is important, it's timely, and it's relevant. From emerging state and federal laws expanding the rights of transgender individuals, to Harvard's own Shula Bayer, the first transgender person to compete in any Division I sport in higher education, to President Obama's mandate on bathroom usage. We know that this topic is one that we should be discussing here at Harvard. Today we have two speakers who are going to share their knowledge and insights with us. Chris Edwards is going to share his personal story of transition, and Jackie Glenn will provide practical information and advice that she has used that you may also use as you engage in the workplace. So I want to move on to this very important conversation. I'm not going to be before you much longer. And so I'm honored and pleased to introduce our first guest speaker, Chris Edwards. Chris? Yeah.
Is this on?
Not yet. I'm not finished.
Oh, you're not finished.
It's okay. Stay here. Chris Edwards grew up in the Boston suburbs and was voted.
She changed into these shoes, you know. She had flats on earlier.
Chris Edwards grew up in the Boston suburbs and was voted most likely to get an ulcer by his high school classmates. He went on to attend Colgate University, where he majored in psychology and minored in keg stands. After building an award-winning advertising career spanning nearly 20 years, Chris left his post as EVP, Group Creative Director at Arnold Worldwide, to write his memoir, Balls, and has been inspiring audiences with his courageous story ever since. He currently lives in Boston's South End with his fake dog, Sanchez. That's another reason we're so connected. We have a fake dog in HR, too.
Nice work.
Whose antics are featured every year on the Edwards family Christmas card. He has yet to develop that ulcer. Seriously, though, he's a phenomenal speaker and author, and we're so excited to hear from him. So let's welcome him to the podium with another round of applause.
Hi, everybody. I'd like to say thank you for having me, and thank you to Andrea and Chris and everyone at FAS for having the balls to bring me to the stage. You guys are the first university to have me come speak, and I'm actually not too surprised because when, I don't know if a lot of you in the room know this, but when Massachusetts made transgender benefits mandated as coverage for insurance in 2014, Harvard was already on board 5 years prior to that. So always paving the way and leading the way, and Harvard was the first to go to Harvard Pilgrim Healthcare and say that this was really important to them and they wanted to be able to provide this benefit. So I am very, very honored to be here. I actually applied to Harvard in 1987. I got rejected. But persistence pays off. Look, I finally got in. I found my way in, just not the way I'd thought. But anyways, I was 24 when I started my career in advertising. It was 1993, and I took a job at Arnold Worldwide as a junior copywriter. And we got a problem here. Who's on? I clicked it. I see him. but I don't see, no one else sees him. It's my dad. He's very handsome. He has glasses. He's got a nice suit on, and he's like one of those corporate office poses where you have to put your hand on the chair. We sort of look alike. So picture me in my 65-ish, and then maybe. So there's this book I wrote called Balls. Comes out October 4th. You can order it on Amazon. You can go to chrisedwardsballs.com and see my website. Thanks, Bob. There's a picture of him. Bob's got a picture of him. Let's see. My favorite color is navy blue. We had oh, there it is. This is the book. It's got a nice photo of me on the back and nice. These are called end sheets, I learned. I could do a reading from the book. Chapter 1. I pee, therefore I am. Jackie, it's looking like you're going to hit some major traffic trying to get to Mashpee later. We're kicking it old school? Okay. Well, let's just imagine that you can see my father. I'll just... No. All right. Well, we're gonna go without the slides. So, all right, you can keep trying, and I'll just talk about it. Anyway, so my father was the CEO and owner of the agency at the time, and let me tell you, it was not easy being the boss's daughter, especially when I knew always that deep down I was his son. And I first verbalized this when I was around 4 or 5. I came out to my grandmother, and I just didn't realize that's what I was doing. Neither did she. Surprise! We were at her cottage on the Cape, her summer cottage, and my older sister Wendy and I were in the family room with our coloring books and crayons coloring, and Graham was going back and forth from the kitchen to the dining room with the food. And on her last pass, she said, "Come on, girls, dinner's ready." And Wendy immediately sprang up and followed her to the table. And I didn't flinch. I honestly did not think she was talking to me. So a minute or two later, when Graham was like, well, I didn't obey her, so she came out and she looked at me and she said, "Didn't you hear me calling you?" And I said, "No." And she said, "I said, come on, girls." And I looked at her and I was like, "I'm not a girl." She goes, yes you are." I'm like, "No, I'm not. I'm a boy." And she said, "No, you're not, sweetheart." And I said, "Well, I'm going to be." And she said, "You can't, darling." And she smiled sympathetically at me and walked back into the kitchen. And I remember being left sitting there like, whatever, Graham, I'm going to make this happen with or without you. I was dumbfounded. What is she, crazy? How could she possibly think that I was a girl? So I put my 5-year-old brain to work, and on my calculations and observations, I realized, oh, well, the only difference between boys and girls was that boys had short hair and girls had long hair. So when we got home, I told my mom I want my hair cut like Daddy's, and she let me, and, problem solved. Or so I thought. It wasn't till the next summer, when I realized I was lacking certain equipment. I was back at Graham's. Everything happens there. This time I was with Wendy and my younger cousin, Adam. And we were out on the back deck eating popsicles. And Adam nudges me and he says, "Watch this." And he turns his back and pees in a perfect arc right over the deck rail. And I was like, when I pee, it goes straight down. And I was like, oh my God, how did you do that? Do you have a squirt gun in there? Oh yeah, let's go. Let's go. Dad. Graham. That's me, but I was younger, a lot younger than 4 or 5. Anyway, back to Adam peeing. So I was like, how did you do that? Do you have a squirt gun in there? And Wendy, older and wiser, is like, duh, he has a penis. And I'm like, oh yeah. And I'm thinking, what is this penis? And how come I don't have one? And so I'm, again, putting my now 6-year-old brain to work, and I'm thinking, well, it probably just hasn't grown yet. It will just probably grow. Kids are all different heights. Everyone grows at a different rate. My penis probably just hasn't grown yet. It'll grow. Well, that didn't happen. And gradually, I began to realize that something was terribly, terribly wrong. And every night, I would pray that somehow, some way, my body would turn into a boy's body, and everybody would finally realize they were all wrong for thinking that I was a girl. Well, my body changed all right, just not in the way that I had hoped. Puberty hit, and my body betrayed me in the worst possible ways that I could ever imagine. And I knew then that I was stuck. I was stuck with this body I hated, and I was stuck being a girl for the rest of my life. And I became deeply, deeply depressed. My whole personality changed. I was no longer the fun-loving kid I used to be. I was angry all the time, snapping at everybody for anything. And my father was the first one to actually call me out on it. After one of my outbursts, he pulled me aside and he said, Chris, what is going on with you? You are always so easygoing. You were the calm one in the family. What is wrong? And I couldn't explain it. I didn't have the words, and even if I could, I was too scared to say anything, and what would be the point? There was nothing I could do about it. Once you say it, you can't take it back. So I just kept it inside, and I answered him the same way any 12-year-old would answer the question, I don't know. In junior high and high school, I knew I was attracted to girls, so I thought I must be gay. And this is actually a very common mistake at first. A lot of people think that being transgender is just an extreme form of being gay. It's hard for people to understand that gender identity and sexual orientation are two completely separate and unrelated things. One way to explain it is sexual orientation is who you go to bed with, and gender identity is who you go to bed as. But I didn't know any of that at the time. All I knew was, oh my God, I think I'm gay. And that was traumatizing enough for me. And you got to remember, this was the early 80s. Nobody was openly gay. Certainly nobody in white upper-class suburbia where I lived. And there weren't even any celebrities that you could point to. George Michael was still in the closet, for God's sake, and those were the Wham years. I mean, he's bopping around on stage in white capri pants singing "Wake Me Up Before You Go-Go." But he's not gay. The problem was, when I looked up the definition of gay, and I did, that's how I am, I'm very thorough. I looked up the definition, and all it said was someone who is attracted to the same sex. It didn't say anything about feeling like you were in the wrong body or wanting to become the opposite sex. So I was like, oh, great. Now I'm a freak. Great. And I decided right then there was no way I was ever going to tell anybody how I really felt inside. Not even my family. In fact, certainly not my family. I couldn't humiliate them, and I just couldn't bear the thought of them being ashamed of me. So, spring of my senior year in high school, I made a decision. I decided that I was going to go to college, party it up for 4 years, and then kill myself after graduation. Now, the first part of the plan was very easy. I had just gotten into Colgate, and they had just been ranked the #1 party school in the US that year, hence my major in keg stands. But graduation came and went, and I just couldn't bring myself to follow through with the rest of the plan. So where did that leave me? Well, when you get to a point in your life where you just don't want to live it anymore, you have basically two choices. You can either end it or you can change it. And since I couldn't bring myself to end it, I knew I had to change it. Now, lucky for me, I had 3 things going for me. And the first was a loving and supportive family. This is my Easter windblown selfie. Now, supportive families, unfortunately, is not something that most trans kids have. And it's a big reason why the suicide attempt rate for trans youth is 51%. Now, I'm not saying when I finally told my parents, they were like, well, let's go get you some surgery, you know. No, I would describe their reaction up front as cautiously supportive. It was a lot to take in, especially back then. There was very, very little information out there, and no success stories that they could look at as examples and say like, oh, well, they did it and turned out okay, Chris will be fine. You know, there was nothing. And surgery was nowhere near where it is today, especially going from female to male. It's a lot harder to add than it is to subtract. So they were scared for me. They were very scared. Scared I was going to go through all of this, only to become a social outcast, lose all my friends, and end up worse off than I already was. I remember a week or 2 after I told them, my dad, wanted to talk to me, and we went for a walk, and he said, very hopeful, do you think maybe you could just live with it, go on as you are now and consider this your handicap? And I looked at him, excuse me. I looked at him and I said, This is my identity. It's not something I can compartmentalize and just put on the shelf and forget about. It's who I am every day. And if I have to go on living as a girl, I would just rather not live at all. And he hugged me, and he said, we'll get through this together as a family. And it was that feeling of not being alone in this anymore that gave me the courage and strength to take the next step. Which brings me to the second thing I had going for me. Damn good therapy. Excuse me, I gotta get a grip here. Finding the right therapist was critical to my getting through my transition as successfully as I did. Anyone who knows me knows that I'm a worrier. I worry about everything. It's in my DNA. As Andrea mentioned, in high school I was voted most likely to get an ulcer. So when it came to changing my gender in front of everybody I knew, I was consumed with worry. Worry about what are people going to think or say or do. It was paralyzing. But what my therapist got me to realize was that I actually had the ability to control that. That the way I acted, people reacted. And figuring that out was like unlocking the secret inner power that I didn't know I had. And it was that power that gave me the balls to change my life, which is why I hold my therapist in such high regard. That doesn't mean I didn't want to kill her at times, especially in the beginning. I remember the very first session I had with her. I'd never been in therapy before, and I go out to her office in Central Square, and she opens the door, and she was exactly what I pictured a Cambridge therapist would look like. Medium-length straight brown hair, graying, parted in the middle, big round glasses, no makeup, turtleneck sweater, chunky necklace, corduroys, sensible all-weather walking shoes. I mean, it was a total stereotype. So I'm sitting there, and she's just staring at me. You know, and so I'm staring at her, and it felt like a lifetime until finally I just said, so where should we start? Where do you want to start? I don't know. Wherever you think is best. Where do you think is best? Oh my God. You know, you go to a therapist because you want a professional to tell you what to do, you know, and answer all your questions. But she just kept asking me questions. She questioned all my feelings and assumptions, beating it to death. But as annoying as it was actually a very, very good thing. My initial plan before going in there was that I would move away and go somewhere where nobody knew me and transition in secret. And she got me to realize that I was going to need a lot of support to get through this. And to go somewhere where I had no family and no friends, while appealing in the short run that I wouldn't embarrass myself, it could actually be a lot more stressful and harmful to me in the long run. So she was the one who opened me up to staying in Boston and transitioning openly at Arnold. Which brings me to the third thing I had going for me. I worked in advertising. So I was able to take the branding and marketing principles that I'd been applying to my client's business and use them to rebrand myself. Now, before I get into that, there's another thing that you should know about me. I am not type A. I am type A+. Maybe A++. It's very rare for a creative director, as my boss, my former boss, Ron Launer, who's here today, as if I wasn't nervous enough, he can tell you, creative directors are not usually like that. But that's why my account team and all the clients love working with me. I was very organized, but I was also a strategizer and a planner. I planned out everything. So you can bet when it came to something as important as my transition, I planned the shit out of that thing. So here's what I did. This is sort of a marketing 101. These are all sort of headers for strategies that we use. So the first thing you do in all branding situations is you take a look at the landscape. See what's going on. So let me paint the picture for you. It was 1995. Transgender wasn't even really a word yet. The only word that was out there was transsexual, which has a very negative connotation. It still does. I cringe when I hear it. And the only points of reference that anyone really had to that word were movies and media. Movies like The Silence of the Lambs. Everybody remembers Hannibal Lecter, but do you remember that the actual villain they were apprehending, Buffalo Bill, was a frustrated transsexual who had been rejected from all the gender clinics. So he took it upon himself to murder women and skin them so he could sew together his own female body. Nice. That's nice. Even comedies like Ace Ventura: Pet Detective. I'm sure you've all seen it. So, spoiler alert, you hopefully this doesn't spoil it, but in the end, Lois Einhorn is actually Ray Finkel, a mentally unstable transsexual, and the butt of the joke. And then, of course, there were the stellar guests on Jerry Springer, as seen in this episode entitled Tranny-licious. So, when it came to changing perceptions, I had my work cut out for me. Not only did I have to rebrand myself, I had to rebrand an entire category. Needed to convey that having gender dysphoria did not make me a whack job like the media might portray. That I'm normal, still the same person on the inside, just a little bit different on the outside. My brand personality, what was that going to be? Well, considering that I was the first and only person at the agency and in the entire community that was publicly going to change their gender, I knew it was up to me to set an example. So right out of the gate, I decided I am not going to be meek or ashamed or secretive about my transition. Instead, I was going to be an educator, be open, honest, willing to answer questions, volunteer information. As Locke can tell you, I'm an oversharer anyway, so this is just an extension of my personality. So it was, very easy. Also, a big part of my personality is my sense of humor, and I made sure I used that wherever possible to put people at ease. The last thing I wanted was for my coworkers to avoid me just out of fear of saying the wrong thing. So wherever I could, I'd throw in a joke about my transition just to show them that I wasn't so sensitive about it, that it wasn't, a big deal, and that they could feel comfortable around me. Now, the first time I did this, it was like an involuntary reaction. I was walking down the hall toward our AV suite, just as the editor happened to be explaining to her intern about what all the different adapter cords were for the equipment. And I happened to be right outside the doorway as she held one up like this and said, "This is a female to male." And so I just stuck my head and I said, "Hey, stop talking about me." I had some real good ones, let me tell you. So how was I going to get the word out there? Well, the good news was, you can call it good news, there was no real internet yet. You couldn't Google anything because there was no Google. So what was formerly a disadvantage to me as I struggled to learn about being transgender was now an advantage in that I had almost complete control of the information. So I would tell people only what I wanted them to know and tell them in the way that I wanted to tell it. So the question was, all right, well, how was I going to do that? I put some thought into it, and I knew that the best way would be for it to come from me directly, because no one can tell my story like I can. And because of my father's position in the company, I decided the best thing to do would be to tell the executive board. I could do a whole talk on that alone. But it was the right thing to do. It was respectful, and I didn't want gossip trickling up. That was the last thing. I wanted to manage the entire thing from the top down. Okay, so let's say I did that. Well, what about the other 500 employees? How are they going to find out? I don't want the board sending out a memo, and I was not about to go and call an agency meeting and announce it. So this is where my background in advertising really came in handy. Back at that time, the big buzzwords in the industry was evangelism marketing. And for those who don't know, evangelism marketing is just basically encouraging other people to take a leadership role in actively spreading the word on your behalf. Today they call it word of mouth. It's cooler, doesn't sound religious, But back then it was evangelism marketing. And at Arnold, our goal was to make consumers brand evangelists for our clients. And it hit me, well, why not make my coworkers brand evangelists for me? And that's what I did. One by one, I came out to 12 of my closest agency friends, told them my story in great detail, and coached them on how to share that story with other people, had them practice on me, which was a very good idea. Some more so than others. And then I told them when the board meeting was. And that after that board meeting was over, they should just go out, start spreading the word. So the board meeting was on a Monday from 4 to 6 p.m. And by 11 a.m. the next morning, the entire agency knew. And remember, this is before Facebook, Twitter, Snapchat. Adriana was still going to teach me how to Snapchat. I don't know what that is. But so that was pretty fast. So my strategy worked. So how'd it go over? Well, I can tell you that the morning after that board meeting, I did not want to go into work that day. Took all I had to force myself to go in. I knew if I didn't, the rumors would spread and people would think I was ashamed. And I was not ashamed. So I was going in. I was just going to go in really, really early. 8:45. Early for a creative person. I knew no one on my floor would be in before 9. And I was right. I just wanted to get in and just go into my office and just not see anyone. And so I did. And I just sat there. And by about 20 past 9, the first person showed up at my door and told me how brave he thought I was. And then actually, the second person that came by was an art director that I worked with. And he popped his head in and he said, "Morning, Chris." Or should I say, Chris? Because my name was still the same, my first name, I just spelled it differently. So that was some good comic relief. And then the head of print production showed up at my door. And she looked at me and she just said, "When you know, let me know how you want me to do your new business cards. And I was like, okay. I mean, it was like this all day. People coming by, account directors on pieces of business I worked on, came by to give me their support and say, come up with a plan. How do you want us to tell clients? And, we'd figure it out. Hugs, well wishes, written notes. One of my buddies who worked in the art studio gave me a bar mitzvah card. Neither of us are Jewish. But he gave me this card, and on the front it said, congratulations, today you are a man. And then, because he worked in the studio and he's all crafty, on the inside, he customized it to include all these guy tips he thought I should know. Like, always look straight ahead at the urinal. There's no, just... Now, I don't want to imply that everybody I saw that day, commented on it or acknowledged it. That's not the case. Most people just treated me as usual, like they normally would, and that's all I wanted. That's all I wanted anyway. And of course, there were some negative reactions. I would be naive to think that there wouldn't be. But none were to my face, which was great. And I think having my father as the CEO helped a lot in that regard. But looking back, the day could not have gone any better. This is usually the worst part of the strategy for creatives. But this was just day one, the announcement. So I hadn't even transitioned yet. I hadn't done anything. And I think there's a big misconception about transitioning that people think, oh, the person decides they're going to do it, and then boom, they show up to work the next day in a wig and a dress. Or, in my case, a haircut, maybe a tie. But the fact is, everybody goes about transitioning in their own way, make their own decisions. Everybody's different. I'll give you some examples. This is Kristen Beck. She's a retired Navy SEAL. She was in the SEALs for 20 years as Christopher Beck. And she basically handled her transition just like I just said. About 2 years ago, she came out on LinkedIn, just changed her name and her photograph, and showed up the next day at her job at the Pentagon in a wig and a dress. Bruce Jenner, he just started transitioning without any explanation, just sort of doing things step by step, and it causing major speculation and tabloid fodder for years, until finally that big Diane Sawyer interview last year, and then officially coming out as Caitlyn on the now iconic cover of Vanity Fair. So in both of these cases, for different reasons, there was a ton of gossip and talk and everything. And my goal was to shut that down as best I could and minimize it. So the way I handled my physical transition was very different. I'd always had short hair. It was sort of a gender-neutral, nondescript haircut. Horrible. And I could have just gone out and gotten a buzz cut. It was the summer, it was hot. I'd always wanted one. I was always jealous of the guys that could just do that. But I knew if I did that, it was such a drastic thing that I'd come into work and it would just give everybody something to talk about. Oh, did you see Chris got a crew cut? Kind of has like a small head. Whatever it was, it would give them more things to talk about. So instead of doing that, I went to my stylist and I told her what was going on. Most people would have taken the easy way out and just gone to someone new, but I liked Kate. And we came up with a plan, and just gradually, in stages, more decisively shorter, more decisively masculine in stages. Same thing with growing a beard. I'm Armenian on both sides. I was on testosterone. There was hair growing everywhere. I mean, I could have grown a beard, no problem. Did I want to? Yes, it would have covered up my newfound acne problem. There's nothing like going through male puberty at age 26, being in CVS in the aisle fighting the junior high kids for the last tube of Oxy-10. But, you know, I knew if I started to grow a beard, again, people go, "Ooh, you see Chris is growing a beard? How long do you think it'll take him to grow a beard? He's pretty hairy." You know, whatever. So I just, you know, I held off on that. And then advertising agencies and Arnold, the creative departments have an anything goes dress code policy. So I was already wearing jeans and button downs, polo shirts, and sneakers to work anyway. So aside from like a client meeting, if I had to wear a sport jacket or a tie or something, my everyday wardrobe changes were relatively minimal. So all combined, year 2 of my transition, people were saying to me, "I have no idea what you used to look like." And I liken it to when someone loses a lot of weight. Like, if you bump into someone and you haven't seen them in a while and they've lost 25 pounds, you're like, oh my God. You know, but if you're with them daily, working with them, and they lose 2 pounds a month, you kind of don't really notice as it's happening. And that was sort of the phenomenon, which was perfect. And then there was the bathroom issue, which seems to be what everybody's focused on today. That's the big thing in the news. Even back 20 years ago, I poured my heart out to the executive board. Ron wasn't there. Unfortunately, he was traveling, so I told him in advance. So I didn't have him there to root for me, just all the conservative people. And I poured my heart out, and all they freaked out about was, oh my God, I was going to use the men's room. Freaked out. Shit got real in that room. So they actually did suggest sending out a memo, which I kiboshed. And I said to them, listen, I thought this might be an issue. So what I'm going to do is for the first 2 weeks of my transition, I am not going to use the men's rooms or the ladies' rooms at Arnold, just to give people time to sit with it and get used to the idea. So you're probably like, well, what did you do? Well, my office was kind of this like weird shape, and there was sort of this, you'd come in and there was this post, and then there was this sort of alcove. So I had facilities come in and put up a curtain. Now, I didn't do that. I held it. No, I didn't. What I did was I took the elevator, every time I had to go, I took the elevator down 14 floors, went out the back of the lobby, around the corner, and up 2 blocks to Rebecca's Cafe where they had a unisex bathroom. Inconvenient? Yes. Especially when you have a bladder the size of a grape, like I do. I've had to pee for the last 10 minutes. But I knew that I'd just suck it up. I knew it was going to be better for me and everyone else in the long run. And it was. And the first few times when I used the sacred men's room, yeah, there was some talk. But it died down pretty quickly. Back then I didn't have outdoor plumbing, so I was using the stalls. And unlike a lot of the guys going in there with reading material, I was not making a day of it in there. Seriously, one guy walked in with a Harry Potter book under his arm. I mean, really? Telling you, ladies, it's a step down. You are not missing anything. And then there is the surgical aspect of the transition, which is what he really wants to know about. That's really what people are curious about, but never to ask. It's sort of, you know, the rule of thumb is don't ever ask anyone who is transgender whether they have had or plan to have surgery, because it's offensive. It's an invasive question. It's really none of your business. But, you know, you keep hearing it's offensive, it's offensive. Does anyone know why it's offensive? Because no one ever explains it. Does anyone know why? Anyone have a guess?
Because it's into a head, the gender. So
That's right. That's right. Gender identity is not defined by what's inside your pants. It's defined by what's inside your brain. Your sex is defined by what's inside your pants, your genitals. So by asking a transgender person that question, whether or not they've had or are going to have surgery, what you're really implying to them is you don't believe they're the gender they affirm they are unless they have surgery and alter their bodies. So that's why it's offensive. Does that make sense? Okay, good. And the fact is, a lot of transgender people never have surgery. And it could be for a number of reasons. It could be they can't afford it because it's not necessarily covered by insurance. It could be fear. It could be who wants the pain, who wants to undergo all of that. It could be they can't get time off from work, or they don't have support, or they're not sure what the results are because that's an if. There could be a number of reasons, and some people are just happy with their bodies the way they are and don't care. It's a very individual decision. For me, I knew I wanted to have surgery. I knew it right away. It was the only way I was going to feel complete as a man. And I underwent a lot. There was a 5-year period at Arnold where I underwent 22 surgeries. That's one every 3 months. The deluxe model doesn't come easy. And all of this while I was managing one of the largest accounts at the agency. And that was a point where I was really thankful that I listened to my therapist's advice and didn't try to go do this in secret. I mean, what was I going to do? Make up 22 different stories about why I was going to be out of the agency for weeks at a time? How was I going to pull that off? So I didn't care if people knew. It was so much less stressful for me that, it's not like they had to know exactly what I was doing. They just knew I was out for surgery. And it was actually better for my team. They knew what was happening. They knew when to reach me, when not to reach me, when to leave me alone. And they actually did use it to their advantage. I found that most of my teams would present work to me 3 days after an operation or 4 days when they knew I'd be doped up on painkillers the most. God only knows what ads I approve. Sorry, Ron. I had one major goal when I set out on this journey, and that was not to let my transition define me. I just wanted to get through it and be the man that I always knew myself to be. It took some time, and all successful rebranding campaigns do, but I achieved that goal. I am not my parents' transgender son. I'm just their son. My friends don't introduce me as my trans friend Chris. It's just Chris or Eddie or P-head or Bird, whatever they're going to call me. I have a lot of nicknames. And at work, I wasn't Chris Edwards, the transgender creative director. I was just a creative director, or an executive vice president, group creative director. I don't want to sell myself short. But, to me, I'm not transgender anymore. It might sound weird, but to me, I was transgender. The word transition means going from one place to another, and I'm here. So if I'm asked to check a box, I check male. I don't check transgender. To me, I was transgender. And that part of my life has been, in the background for a long time. That said, a few years ago, I made the decision to step back into the spotlight and write a book about my experience. It's called Balls. Take some to get some. It officially comes out October 4th, but Andrea and I were able to pull a few strings and get some copies here. So some of you might be getting one. For those of you who aren't, as I said, you can go to my website, chrisedwardsballs.com, find the link on Amazon. But anyway, The backdrop of the story is my gender transition, but really the universal message is, you know, having the courage, having the balls to be who you are and be authentic, no matter what it is, whether you're going through a divorce or you're recovering alcoholic or you've had a disability and you're worried about how people see you. You have the ability to control and define yourself. Don't let other people define you. My hope is that people will read the story, though, and come away empowered and inspired and hopefully more accepting about people who are transgender, which is the same thing I hope will result from my speaking here today. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. That was amazing. Amazing. Thank you so much, Chris. That was amazing. I'm going to introduce our next speaker to you now, and we're going to have another amazing presentation from Jackie Glenn. Jackie is the Vice President and Global Chief Diversity Officer for EMC Corporation, and she is leading the diversity and inclusion strategy for the company's global operations. She's implemented programs in employee relations, training and development, recruiting, organizational development, consulting, as well as coaching. Her leadership has led to several groundbreaking efforts, including the implementation of a mandatory diversity and inclusion curriculum, institutionalization of the Transgender Reassignment Program, and the launch of its High Potential Women's Program. Jackie has been profiled in various magazines, including Black Enterprise, Working Mother, and the Boston Business Journal. She's also developed a transition guideline booklet for management and staff, and each of you will receive one when you send in your evaluation. We'll return to you a copy of that guide that you can have for your own use. She was also named one of the top 10 influential women in global diversity. And she's a friend. Jackie and I go way back to the 80s. And I'm so proud of her and watching her progression. And so we're honored to have her here with us today. So let's welcome her with a round of applause, Jackie Glenn.
Thank you. Thank you, Timothy. So you noticed Timothy escort me to the stage, and I have a fake knee or a new knee or a bionic knee, but I won't stop wearing my heels, but I've gotten a little practical and they're wedged. So sometimes when I'm taking the stage, I like a little assistant. But I want to first and foremost thank Chris and Andrea. We go back a long way back in the days of our HR to having me here today. It's such an honor and a privilege, and I don't take it lightly. I was talking to my husband this morning about speaking at Harvard, and you know, and he said, "Oh, I have a speech at Harvard." It just sounds so big, and so I really want to thank Chris. It's such a pleasure to have met you, and we're going to become fast friends. We're going to do roadshow together, and we're just going to be all over. Me and you. But I am going to come at this from a different perspective, and having Chris in the room as I was listening to him speak, I know that I have some stuff in here that you might be like taking me behind the shed about, but I'm just gonna talk to you about how we did it, why we did it at EMC, and just really speak as an individual, as a Chief Diversity Officer, but first and foremost as a person who have taken quite a few people through their transition. So I sat there and I was getting a little nervous because I was like, oh God, I will be here until midnight if you make me speak without my slide. Where's mine? So but I have my trusty little hard copy. While I am standing here, because some of you know that I have to run out of here, I wanted to also thank my assistant, Sarah Oyatubo, is in the audience. Nobody gets things done by themselves, and I really want to thank you, Sarah and Timothy, for just always being there and helping me when I have these presentations. So today I'm going to really just go over a little bit about the gender transition program at EMC, because I really want to come at it from a different angle. Stages of a typical transition journey at our company, why we do it at EMC, and one success story. And then we'll end, and if we have time for questions, I will take questions also. So I really loved it when you talked about authenticity, because everyone who knows me knows that I am really big on bringing my authentic self to work. There are days when it gets me into a lot of trouble, but I really believe that being authentic is really easier than not. You don't have to think about what you're going to do and say if you're being your authentic self. And so I really love this quote from Brené Brown, where she said authenticity is a collection of choices that we have to make every day. It is about a choice to show up and be real, the choice to be honest, the choice to let our true self be seen. Don't you like that quote, Chris? I love that quote. And so I decided to start out this presentation with that quote, because when you're being inauthentic, you know, finally it catches up with you and it's not pretty. This number is much higher now, I know, but this, I was just doing this presentation in Virginia, and someone asked me where I got the number from, and if you are like me and can't read without your glasses, it's Marie Claire. 700,000 is the number estimated of people who identify as transgender. Okay, it's now 1.3 million, so we'll correct that, Sarah, but the number is big any way you slice it, right? And what it tells us as practitioners, as co-workers and employees, the number is going up, and we really have to really get our head wrapped around that. No matter where you are in this world, someone in your family, someone who sits next to you, someone might be going through this at some point. And I think it's important for you to understand it and to really, we talked about it at lunch, not just empathize, but to understand and treat the person like you would want to be treated. I think that is always the point. So I want to give you a little, because we started doing our transition program long before it was cool at EMC. And for those of you who don't know EMC, we are a technology company way up there in Hopkinton, Massachusetts. And we are getting ready to be called Dell, because we just got bought by Dell and we're closing that merger. We're going to be the largest technology company in the world with over 140,000 employees and 80 billion in revenue. But we were doing this when we were EMC with 60,000 employees globally. And in 2000 and maybe 6 or 7, Associated Press came to EMC and did a story on us about our transition program. Is it going to work if I click it, Sarah? No? I wonder how do I get the video to work. It might not work. I'm not, video. Do I just click? Never mind. I'm not even gonna try. There is a video embedded here. It's a real 2 minutes video, and it just shows you a little bit about what we've done at EMC as it pertains. There's a video in there somewhere. Oh yeah, if you click on that, does it work? All right, it doesn't work. We'll move on. But anyway, let me just speak a little bit to it since it doesn't work. It's just a 3-minute interview video that they came into EMC and they really interviewed myself, the global head of HR, to really talk about what was the impetus for us to really do this program long before people could even pronounce the word transgender. And we had a real forward-thinking global head of HR back in 2011. Even before that, we had people that would come and say, you know, I'm going through a transition, or I want to go through a transition. Will you pay for it? And I just thought I was bold, because I'm thinking, how are you going to go to HR and ask them to pay for your transition? But people did. And every time someone came to our head of HR, he would say yes. And so we had transitioned at about 2, and I wasn't the chief diversity officer then. And when I became the chief diversity officer, about the third person came and asked if they could get a transition done. And at the time, because it wasn't a benefit, we were just doing everything, Chris. You know, you want your facelift, everything, the breast augmentation, anything. We were just paying for all of that. And I said to the head of HR at the time, I said, you know, I was a chief diversity officer then, so I had a lot going on. I was thinking, okay, this would be good if we made it a benefit. But also it would be great because not only will everyone has the opportunity to use it, because what was happening, Chris, you get it, you tell Andrea, Andrea tell Jackie, Jackie tell the Chris over there, I tell Sarah, Timothy, and next thing you know, you have all these people and it wasn't sustainable at the rate we were going. So I said to him, why don't we just make it a benefit? And I said, on the flip side of that, we could be one of the forward-thinking company for HRC, and it would be next practice for our company. And you know, at the time, I thought I really was gonna get a lot of pushback, but he said, okay, go for it. It was, when we made it a benefit, and I could be wrong, but I think it was right around 2000 and probably 11, yeah. I'll fix it if I lie, Chris, because you know, I know you're gonna hold me to it because you're an A++ personality. Yeah, around that time, and Timothy, when I'm up here, I can't remember my numbers, but it was long before it was cool. And so we went off and really collaborate with Harvard Pilgrim, with Tufts University, just to see who would, because we're self-insured EMC, just to see how we could get it done, and we got it done, fast forward. And the first one that I personally did, and let me just move on to some slides, was about right after it became a benefit. And I decided, and I was speaking to this as lunch, that if I was gonna take someone through a transition, I needed to be steep in it. And for people who know me, you're A++, I like the detail. And I wasn't really prepared, Chris, for what I was gonna encounter. And I think we talked about this at lunch, that I by no means think that this is a comfortable conversation, but there's a lot of conversation that we have in life that's not comfortable. So when this individual at EMC, who was a principal engineer at 60 years old, decided to transition from a male to a female, because he's an engineer and he has an A++ type personality, he wanted me to come and spend some time with him so he could take me through a tutorial in what was going to happen. And so I went, and I literally got a schooling around why gender identity disorder, what he had, and why he wanted to do it at this stage in his life. I even went as far as going to his therapist with him. One might say, okay, Jackie, isn't that above and beyond the call of duty? For me, no. For me, it was important that I went to the therapist, I listened in on the conversation, which she was fine with, Chris, but that I was able, because I think that we spoke about it at lunch, that, you know, sometimes when you're going through this or you're sitting in the audience and you're thinking, someone did say this to me once, if God wanted to make them a gender, he would have made them that gender. And I was like, you know what? That is your opinion. However, when you're sitting with someone, I think there's a give and take on both sides. The person who's going through the transition, understanding that people have questions and want to learn, and the person like myself who's understanding what it takes to go through a transition, treat that person the way you would want to be treated in any situation. And so I went through the entire thing, and there were times in the transition that I really was like, do I have to know all of this? So at one point, he showed me, he said, you know, I started cross-dressing, and then I decided I really wanted to transition. And then because he was an engineer, he told me he was taking hormones so you could slowly see the change, and that's the first step. And then he showed me what was gonna happen with the top half surgery. And then when he got into the bottom half of the surgery, I said to him, can I just like take a break right now and just come back in a minute? Because it was a lot. But I did go back, Chris, and I went through the entire anatomy of how everything was gonna take place. And you said it's not anyone's business. But I think that as a practitioner, as an HR business partner, which I am by training, I think as if someone, a loved one of yours is going through it, I think sometimes, Chris, it's important for us in HR and as the diversity office, we run this program at EMC to know what you entails, because you're right. Some people transition and don't do anything, but there are some people, and I'll give you a couple of examples that have happened to us, because today we have transitioned around anywhere between 12 people globally, and from one gender to the other, or some people just want to do it without any, and some people go off, and there's been a myriad of stuff that have happened in the amount of people that we have transitioned. I'm not gonna get a lot into this, but I know that you're gonna call me out because now that we're friends, I have this word on here. Because I think before you know what you're doing or before you're steep in it, this word was a word, transsexual, that was used for a while. And so I got a little education today, so it will come out of my slide. But the first stage is, you talked about it. That's why I'm not gonna go in, you hide it, you deny it. When I sit and listen to people that have transitioned around what they go through, you can't help but really listening and understanding. Once they accept it, and then as they transition. So there are steps. And as we're doing this at EMC, I want to really quickly take you through what we do, because a lot of time when people are ready to transition at EMC, they call the diversity office. Why? Because we have an LGBT community, and while they're not mutually exclusive that everyone who transitions is in that community, they usually find that community first to come to us. Sometimes they'll go to HR, and HR quickly will come to us. And we do exactly what Chris said. We start from our executive level, because everybody doesn't have to know, but the people, because we're such a big company, this particular individual that I transitioned, we're dealing with external customer, and we wanted to make sure that when she comes back into the workplace as Grace, that everyone was prepared for it, and there would not be, productivity wouldn't stop, we wouldn't have this old disruption in services, and what we're looking for is to matriculate her back into the workplace without any type of missed opportunity. So when we sat down, one of the things I really wanted to point out was, and I'll go back, is once we start the transition, we have a project plan, and I'll move along the slide to show you what I do. But we really give the individual a lot of latitude to work with us. We don't say, okay, this is all you have to do it. We really let them guide us in this. Just a little bit more stats, and Chris might buck on some of these, but I pulled these again I try to cite my source on this. And I remember I was in California, and I picked up a paper he said I was good. When you get at this, I picked up a paper, and I read a story on this individual is African American, transgender in the workforce, and I was reading a story on this particular individual around how it's easy for Bruce to become Caitlyn Jenner, and they were talking about the affluent of it and having money and being able to get the surgery versus someone who is more not in that socioeconomical bracket, and you're trying to transition and you're getting harassed in the workplace. And this individual chronicled how much job loss she had as she transitioned. And so it's a huge problem. And so one of my job as I do this is to really educate the HR community and the executive community around the workplace piece of this. So I want to move along. the transgender program came about at EMC just because people wanted it, not because we thought we were going to win prizes and be 100 score on the HRC, but good things came out of it. And so I don't want to underscore that. As we made it a benefit and we started transitioning people, this is our transition guide. And Andrew, I just want to point out that every year, because this topic has grown over the years so much, every year I try to update it so that nothing is outdated in it. And so if you give it out, just keep in mind it's fluid and it's a working process. And I did it because I wanted to make sure the HR practitioners have something that they could work with. We also have, since we came out with that benefit, Chris, we've scored an 100 every single year on our HRC index. And that's no small feat. You know, it's a big thing to get 100 year over year on that particular survey, because they change the question every year and it's not cookie cutter. We have also moved up the rank from, got on the list as a great place to work, started at number 18, and now we're at number 6. So we have done a lot of things. The reason we do it, there's a lot of study out there that a happy employee is a more productive employee. There's also a lot of study out there around losing valuable talent and having to replace them and the cost of replacing talent. So as a STEM, science, technology, engineering, math company, we have a hard time finding talented employees. And so when we have employees who are talented, we want to keep them. And so this is one of the big reasons why we do what we do. This is the HR piece of it, where, or the manager's piece of it, where we really have a roadmap. This roadmap was not, we didn't sit in a room with HR practitioner like Andrea and I and come up with this, but I made all the individual, Chris, who went through a transition, they helped me with the planning, managing expectation, and I will give you a story, Chris. When I was transitioning Grace, we had a lot of knockdown, drag out, because I was trying to wrap my head around it, and Chris was not having a lot of patience with me, and I wasn't with her. And so there were days when we would just be at odds end. And I don't want to stand on the stage and let people think that when you start to transition someone, that there are not going to be some bumps in the road. So we planned, I managed expectation, and I'll tell you what I mean by that, Chris. When someone decides to transition, I use Chris because, Grace, because, not you, I didn't transition you. I use Grace because I did it with her from start to finish. She did a plan, and I had to look at it, Andrea, and said, okay, this is not realistic. What we did was, there was a period where she was going to leave as Tom and come back as Grace. In that period of time, I had a chance to sit with the executive. Now, some of the employees who are going through the transition wants to be in that conversation. A lot of them said, no, you go sit with them alone. I don't want to be in there. And I start from the top of the house. I talked about it. The reason why I love Grace, the one I did, was because she wrote a letter. Why at this stage in her life? She wrote an eloquent letter about the gender identity disorder, some of her struggles, and all of our executive got a copy of that. Then they got a copy of what was going to happen, the timeline, because I think managing expectation, this is someone who's going to leave work, someone has to cover for them. When Tom leave, coming back as Grace, it was going to be in a different gender. So I'm working with HR to change the name, to change the HR records, and I'm doing a myriad of training with the employees that are directly working around Grace and external vendor. So I am managing, bringing someone in to do the training, training the executive, training HR, training the employee, and training our external vendor. So when Grace come back to work with the upper surgery done, not necessarily the lower, but Grace will be dressing in the gender that's in here. Am I saying that right? No, I feel like I'm in like I'm taking a test here. And so that's when the bathroom, yeah, because he's like looking at me like, you better say it right. And so when by the time Grace come back into the workplace, the top surgery is almost done. And as you said, there might be some stuff done, but yeah, she's presenting female. So one of the things that Grace had to do, and not a lot of people do it, but he had a big Adam's apple. He had to get that shaved down, some stuff, some softening of the features. And I really love that because I'm very inquisitive just by nature. So I wanted to know, and we had become fast friends. So he didn't mind telling me what he's going to look like when he became Grace. And so the bathroom piece came in. So the good thing, and I think for Harvard, you know, we have a lot of bathrooms that are just standalone. So what we did, no 14th floor down the stairs and out the back for us, Chris. We had a bathroom, we identify a bathroom, and we had the locks put on it that it was a keyed-in lock. You had to have a code to get in. And that was the bathroom we used. And I had to sit with the executive and explain to them why we needed a bathroom, especially when the bottom half surgery took place. And so there was a lot of education that went into that and went into HR. You want to make sure that you have an external and an internal SME that can really come into the workplace and really speak to both the executive and the employees about gender identity disorder and how people transition and what it is. You want to manage your employees and the managers, and you want to make sure that you have ongoing education. I just came back from Virginia, and I did this presentation. I got some feedback, and one of the feedback that was given, Jackie, when Jackie leaves and Jack come back, do you give the employee a chance to mourn Jack? Because Jack was in the workplace so long, and what do you do for that? So we have a lot of ongoing training. We don't do the training just once and let it go, but we do make sure that we're keeping in touch with the person who have transitioned, how things are going, we check in. We have someone in the diversity office that is our full-time job along with a few other things to make sure that as we transition someone, that they are not just forced back into the workplace and left to their own fruition. We make sure that that gets taken care of. We also have stakeholder, team members, and customers. We have one situation where we transitioned someone in the federal government. This person had security clearance, the ICE level, and was working with the federal government. So as we did the transition, what we had to do was go into the federal government and do the training there. And I have to just pause a little bit and speak to the acceptance rate and the retention rate of people that we have transitioned. This is Grace, the one that we had knocked down, drag out, and I really wanted to tell a little story about Grace because after we had spent so much time together, she came back to EMC, stayed there for about 3 years, and then left EMC and opened her own practice. And she's our primary trainer now for all of our transition training. So she goes all over the world for EMC and does the training. So it's a great success story. If you Google her, you'll see what she has done in this area of work, and just a real nice individual and a great sense of humor too, and doesn't really take herself seriously. And really, this goes to show you how if you do it and you do it right, how it ended up being a retention tool, but it also ended up having people who evangelize the company and the benefits that we have. And so we had one person in the federal government that we transitioned, and that one was done a little, it wasn't done the way it was supposed to be done because the individual decided, and I think the young lady that he wanted to do his own thing and we shouldn't ask him any questions, just give him the benefits and he'll do it when he felt like. But when you're working in an organization as big as EMC or Harvard, you really do need some process because if you don't have it, all hell will break loose. So this individual just went out and started the surgery and didn't tell anyone. and then showed back up in the next gender without telling us and went into the ladies' room. I cannot even stand here and tell you what happened, but someone who knew the individual saw them coming out of the ladies' room and just had a complete meltdown. So there are things that can go wrong. We fixed it, but the reason why we put things in place as a company, Chris, is to make sure that we can manage expectation, help matriculate the person back into work, and set expectation so we don't have any misunderstanding. And Grace does a real good job helping us transition people back into work and help them out. I want to really stop a bit because I want to make sure I'm not hogging the time. But I really think everything that I have on here, Chrissy went over it. I will send you my site so you can tell me if I have anything on here that's not correct. But we really want to make sure that people understanding that more about gender variance can lead to more acceptance. So we talked about, people not on board with it. And I do not want to stand on this stage and tell you that I have not had to really sit with some people and said, okay, this is going to happen. Here's what's going to happen. And here's how I need you to manage it. But I will tell you that the proof turns out is that when the employee comes back into the company and their production, what they do, their work goes up, I get called from the sales force saying to me, you can transition anyone you want in my group. Because it's really, it's not, I have had salespeople transition, and I told the story on Tuesday. I had one salesperson transition, and I think we were talking about it, Andrea, or one of us, we were talking about it. And I was really having heartburns transitioning a salesperson who was having a hard time making their numbers. You're not a salesperson if you're not making your numbers. But we decided we were going to go ahead and make this, do this. And this individual came back in the workplace, have never missed a beat, have made and exceeded their quota. And I got a call from the area manager and said, anybody else want to transition? I'm on board for it. This person came back, a new person, just really hit the ground running, was so appreciative and just really grateful for the company standing behind them. And confident because they were living their authentic self. So there is so much good stories that we've had at EMC and people that we have transitioned. And so I would really encourage you to just give it a chance, listen to people. I always say to people, I want to treat people the way that I would like to be treated. I think it's just easy, I don't never stand in judgment and keep an open mind. The 78%, and it's probably more, Chris, are people who felt more comfortable when they come to work. I'm sure it's more than that now. And then this is, I just really, really like this because we had, I'm trying to figure out where this person was. It was Seattle. This is a letter we got from someone that we transitioned in Seattle. And I just, for those of you in the back of the room, I feel like I'm in grade school if I read it out, but I just love to read it out loud. With the great people and the culture behind iSalon, which is a division of EMC and EMC, I have no worries about coming to work as Justine and living as my authentic self for the first time in my life. I consider iSalon and engineering in particular as my chosen family. I will continue to bring my A game to work, help create kick-ass product for our I love to say that word, for our customer and enjoy life to its fullest. This is really a testament for why we do what we do at EMC. The last story I will tell you is that we started a transition with another engineer out of New Jersey. And I'm looking at Timothy because Timothy, and this person started transitioning, married with children later on in life. And as she started going through her transition, she found out she had cancer. So we had to stop the transition, have her do her treatment and resume the transition. And right after we transitioned her, not right after, but a couple months, she died. But I was watching, not from the transition, but from the cancer. And Timothy sent me a video and just some letters of testimony that people had, and just nice words and thoughts. And we had an interview with her that we had done before she died. And this is why we do what we do at EMC. Our CEO, David Goulbin, said, we're not a technology company, we're a people company that does technology. And this, to me, makes me so proud to work there, because it's when you read letters like these, you really understand why we do what we do. And so I'm going to turn it over for question, but I'm going to go a little bit because I know that I spoke fast, so I want to make sure that people can get a hold of me. And all the things that we spoke of, if you're looking for any of my benefits, what we cover at EMC, because I want to back up a little bit and said when we came out of, when we start to cover this, we were like covering everything, as I said, and then we got a grip on it and sort of benchmark what people covered. And so we now cover certain things we don't, so you can look that up on, and also our transition guide. But I want to thank you guys for having me here, and if you have any questions.
Thank you so much, Jackie, for that wonderful presentation. We have left time for questions and answers. We have about 15 minutes for questions and answers. One thing we do ask, though, this is being live streamed, and so that the questions can be picked up by the media, we ask that you speak into the mic with your questions, and Tracy Collins has a handheld mic. And if there are questions in the breakout room or the overflow room, feel free to either come over, or I think Attain Smith is over there managing that process. So do we have questions? Someone in the back.
Thank you very much for these stories and kind of examples. We do very much appreciate them. But I think I'm wondering, can anyone speak to the success stories for people who don't choose to be as public about their transitions? People who maybe don't want to go into the depth of the detail of sharing so much of these personal stories. I mean, how can we help support them, or how do we help support them through that?
I'll speak to it a little bit, and then I'll have Chris. But I have a young man who is 20 years old, still in college, and is interning at EMC, and really is not supported by his family. And because he's an intern at EMC, he doesn't get benefits. So he does not want anyone to know what he's going through. So what he used my office for is really coaching, counseling, and what I've been doing is introduce him to people who have gone through the entire transition so that he can have a support group. He's really young, and he's really having a hard time, and he really don't want anyone to know. However, I just had a conversation yesterday with the manager that runs this program for me, because although he said he didn't want anyone to know, he comes to work for summer, and he had on a skinny jeans with the sandals with his nail polish on his toe, which was like neon blue, and his fingernail, he had on, his nails were done. And so he didn't, I guess no one cares at EMC, you can come as you are, but someone said something to him, and so he called us, and he was quite upset. So it really sometimes is very important that when people make the decision of what they want to do, that they sort of stick to it, because if you don't want anyone to know, then you can't come with extra nails, but because people might pick up. But we also have people who, we found we had problems with people who all their life they were modeling one gender, not the one that they were born with, but when we came out with a benefit, they decided that since we had paid for others, they would like to get paid for it, even though they had it done years ago. And so there's a lot of variation when people don't want it, but we try to respect people's privacy, and a lot of times they don't go to HR, they come to diversity because they really don't want anyone to know, because they haven't made a decision yet, and we respect that.
I think it's very different based on Because gender identity disorder is now not considered a disorder, it is now starting to be covered by insurance. And Massachusetts it's a mandate. So if states jump in, that will benefit. But really, what it comes down to, I think, your success, this is my own personal thought, is can you pass? And if you don't want anyone to know, and you can pass, then you probably do have more success than someone maybe, there's a saying, let me make sure I get it right. There's a saying among the community that male to female pass better in the sheets, female to male better on the streets. Because, it's easier, I guess, people think for
A woman.
to look like a guy, but the surgery is more challenging. I think mine turned out pretty good. But the surgery for male to female is much, much easier and less complicated. So it's very individual. People's success stories vary based on support, passing, resources, and all that. So it's really hard to say.
Other questions? There's a hand in the back.
Here, you stand there.
Hi. Yeah, I have a question for Chris. I was curious about, struck by your comments about how you no longer identify as transgendered and you now just identify as male. And how prevalent is that in the transgendered community? I mean, it made perfect sense to me, but I'd never heard anybody actually say it before.
I don't have any statistics or anything, but I know people who feel both ways. So there are a lot of people who, like me, just wanted to transition, and when you're done with the transition, you're just done.
Yeah.
And you get on with your life, and you're a guy, and you move on. There are others who are just, yeah, you know what? I'm proud of being transgender, and I'm going with it, and I feel good about it, and that's how they feel. So everyone is different. I can't quantify it, but I do want to make one thing clear, because I don't know that it is clear. Everything sort of happened right on the tail end. When Facebook came out with 50 different ways to express your gender. Society was just starting to get a grasp on, okay, so transgender is male to female or female to male. But transgender is an umbrella term, and it encompasses the term transsexual. It isn't that it is an incorrect term. It's just got negative connotations because it's like sexual, and it's from that time when it was just so poorly portrayed. It just has negative connotations. But what that word means is technically somebody who has transitioned and changed their gender. But the term transgender encompasses people who are gender fluid, gender queer, gender non-binary, and all of these are new terms that are just starting to come out. That's where I think in the workplace and in school, that's where it gets really tricky.
Yeah, it's tricky.
Because which pronouns do you use? What do they prefer to be called? Some days they may dress male and prefer to be called a male pronoun. Other days they may feel more female if they're gender fluid and show up looking more female. And what do you do and how do you
manage
react?
that in the workplace?
And I would say the best thing for everyone is to take your cues from that person. Ask them if you don't know. Ask them what pronoun do you prefer. When I went through it, I did it out in the open, but in ad agencies, the turnover is so high. For me to stay, I was there almost 20 years. That is rare. Very, very few people stay in ad. That's how you make money. You jump from agency to agency. So more accurately, people leave every 2 to 3 years. So by the time I was leaving, nobody knew. Like at first there was a time everyone knew, then most people knew. Then I wasn't sure. Who knows? Who doesn't know? I'd make a joke, and if someone was like, what? So, by the time I left, I'd say 80% of the company had no idea. Right. One young woman had worked for me in my group. I had a team of probably 40 or 50 when you combined all the departments. And she had been there about a year, and she said to her boss, who was a good friend of mine, she said, I heard a rumor that there's a creative director who used to be a woman. Is that true? And Mary was like, yeah. She said, who is it? She goes, it's Chris. Chris Edwards, your creative director. She was like, what? So again, it all depends, and you just kind of have to go with it. I wasn't broadcasting it, but I wasn't hiding it either.
But Chris, would you agree that there are some people, because I know that there's a few individuals that went from male to female that I walk around EMC and see them all the time, and if you never knew what they were, you wouldn't be able to tell, and they do not want anybody to know they were one gender. I had a conversation with one individual who was getting a new boss, and she called me, and she was really in a tizzy because she wanted to make sure nothing in her record showed that she was a male before she had no intention of telling her new boss, and she didn't want that part of her life out in the open anymore. And then, as you said, there's some people that, they will go with me to things they want everybody to know, and they sort of, like Grace, live it, breathe it, and have no problem with that.
Not everyone has a personality like I do or like Grace does. A lot of people are private, and they don't want anyone to know, and that you have to respect that. You have to respect that too, and I get it. It's hard for me. It'd be a lot easier now if I, was married. I want to get married someday, and my last relationship was 3.5 years, and we broke up, but it wasn't because of transgender, it was just because of other things. But then I was writing this book. Now, before, it was in my past, and anybody new I met, they didn't know, and I didn't feel the need to tell them unless I, felt a bond with them or whatever. So a lot of people in my life only know because of this book. So in a way, I'm coming out all over again. I'm sort of taking one for the team. But, I never wanted it to define me, and it has been defining me for the last almost 4 years. And it's really been hard for me because I go on a date, and they're like, what do you do? And I can't say I'm a creative director at Arnold anymore. That's what I used to say, and the conversation would play out. Oh, well, what ads have you done? Have I seen them? I'm like, yeah, the singing, give me back that fillet of fish, give me that fish. And they'd be like, either like, oh, yeah, or, oh. Now, it's what do you do? I'm a writer. I say Locke has sort of been coaching me on this. But the more vague I am, I was on this date, I got set up. I was on this date, and it came up, and she was like, well, what's your, I feel if I don't say I'm writing a book, I'm lying, because that is the main thing that I have been doing.
You're not being
all
authentic.
they have to do is Google me, and I'm not being authentic. So I just say I've written a memoir. I've written a book. What is it? Oh, it's a memoir. And then I feel like it usually will get dropped. Oh, no. Oh, most people are like, what could you possibly have to say? That's book-worthy. This one would not let it go. So the first 10 minutes, she's like, well, tell me what the book is about. Like, would I try to change it? No. And I said, listen, it's a little heavy for a first date. And she's like, oh, well, if you're not comfortable, then we don't. And I'm like, oh, well, you want to go there, let's go there. So,
did you have a second date?
So I went there. There was no second. But then there was another time where a friend said to me, I want to fix you up. I'm like, oh, God, no, please. And so what I decided to do is I said, now that I have an online footprint, which I did not have previously, I said, okay, here's what you do. Tell her you've got a great guy you want to fix her up with. Tell her to Google me, and then she can opt in. If she wants to meet me, we'll set up the meet. So a day or two later, my friend Alex says, she wants to meet you. Let's do it. I'm like, all right. So we set up a dinner date, and I was in New York for a publicity summit or something. And I'm learning to pitch myself in the book and all that crap. And I'm just like, again, I'm struggling with this whole transgender being my main identity now. So I go to meet her for dinner, and she knew I was at a conference. She didn't know what it was. She's like, how was your conference? And I said, oh, it was good. It was all right. I'm just still just not comfortable being this transgender poster boy. And she goes, what? What?
Did she not read it?
She didn't Google me. I go, you were supposed to Google me. She goes, if someone sets me up, I trust them. I don't Google. I'm like, oh my God. So now we have the conversation, but it was great, and we had another date.
Okay.
There's just no chemistry, though. So
Okay.
it didn't work out. But she was great about it. So,
Okay, we're going to leave the dating game.
anyway, I'm still single. All right, enough about that. Who's got another question?
But we have time for another question. Is there another question? Anyone
Come
in
on.
the
There's gotta be
overflow room? There's
something
got to
you
be some
want.
questions in the back.
Oh, there.
You've talked about transitioning someone who's already employed, and I'd wonder if you have any thoughts or advice about hiring someone who's transgender in terms of making them more comfortable, introducing them to the institutional culture and things like that.
Right. So we have hired quite a few people that have that are transgender or have done either some of it or is in the middle of it, not knowing we did. Because when we hire someone, we're just looking at their skill set and their background. When there's nowhere on our application or they don't put it on their resume, what ended up happening as our benefits became, as it became a benefits and it got socialized and where it's on our website, what I was saying earlier on is that people who came to work for us, either who have gone through it and paid for it, were really asking us to refund them the money because they did it on their own. So that was another tricky part for the HR practitioners in the room. So that is another talk all over again with HR practitioner, because we really had to sort of put a marker in the sand and say what we were going to do and what we were.
So I'd like
There was one. We came to a compromise with some people depending on where they were, but we had a few things. If you're in the workplace and you're looking at it as a practitioner or just a manager, you know, there are just certain steps that you need to take. And as a manager, if someone comes to you and asks you or tell you that they want to do this, you might want to just, before you start the dialogue, get HR in the conversation first with you, because sometimes people think they know what they're saying, and as you said, Chris, people will go off on a tirade or a deep end and start telling you what their philosophy is, which is not necessarily a company philosophy. But yes, we've hired people, not because of who they identify as, but because of the skill set and what we're looking for. That's
Yeah, it's hard. You can't shield an employee from everything. Even when there was no policy when I did it, so I was kind of helping them come up with a policy. You think you had to listen? My HR people heard quite a ton from me too, but I'll tell you one thing that got cut from my book. But I said I wasn't going to use the bathrooms for 2 weeks, and I didn't. That 2 weeks is up to the day. I'm in there, maybe a day later, and I'm in the men's room. I'm washing my hands, and this guy comes in, and he opens the door and he sees me, and he looks, and he walks back out. A second later, he comes back in and he goes, Chris? Like, what's going on? He thought he walked into the ladies' room by mistake. So he comes back in, he's like, Chris? And I go, have you been away? He's like, I've been on paternity leave. I was like, I am late for a meeting, but ask anyone in the studio, they'll tell you. And this guy was a born-again Christian. And so for the next few weeks, he wanted to talk to me. I was warned by others not to accept the invitations for lunch, but he was going to talk me out of it. So finally, somebody told one of my evangelists, kind of told him, just back off and go. But so not everyone is going to be accepting.
Well, thank you very much, Chris and Jackie. Let's give them another round of applause. And our Associate Dean, Chris Ciotti, is here to give our closing.
Thanks, folks. I have some folks to thank and some gifts to give out for the last minute or two. So clearly, this is a complicated, complex topic that we've been talking about today. And what these dialogues are all about, our summer dialogue as well, is about creating a safe space where we can talk about these things and where we can ask questions and we can learn together. So hopefully today has really been all about that. Before I go any further, I would again like to thank Chris Edwards and Jackie Glenn for taking the time to be here today and to help us begin the learning about this very important topic. So you deserve another round of applause, and you're going to get one. You know, from just the story that you shared with us has been invaluable, I think, at least for me, and hopefully for everybody in the audience. And Jackie, the work that you've led at EMC, it's really best practice. I mean, I'm sure we'd love to clone you. I'm sure they'd love to clone you, but we would certainly like to do that. I'd like to thank Hands in Motion for the sign language interpretation services today. And we're not finished yet. Our FY17 Diversity Dialogue Series is going to begin in October, and this year's theme is intersectionality. Now, some of you may know what that means, which is terrific. You're going to learn a lot more next year as we delve into that topic. For those of you who don't know, Google it. Learn a little bit. And then you'll know, and we'll begin together. It goes without saying, and I say this every time, and it's important to me that everybody knows it, and I know it, that we get to stand here today and present this programming because of our FAS senior leadership, Mike Smith and Leslie Kerwin. And they generously and consistently support us with their time and their voices and their commitment and their funding. So thank you again to Leslie and Mike. It always takes a village, and there's so many other colleagues in FASHR and the FAS diversity team who work behind the scenes to make today's summer dialogue possible. So thanks to everybody on my wonderful team who worked and volunteered at today's event. A special thanks goes to Andrea Kilton-Harris. You got to stand up. Andrea is a member of our FAS diversity team, and she leads the charge on the diversity dialogue. She spearheads this effort. We're so lucky to have her passion and her knowledge in this regard. So thank you, Andrea. And last but not least, thanks to everybody in this room. I know how busy everybody is, and I know how many commitments pull at you all day, every day. And you could choose to be in a lot of different places for several hours, and thank you very much for being here today. So thank you for that. Now, hang on, because Chris talked about his book, which I have a copy of here today. So they gave me one. Andrea gave me one on Monday. And so, I started to read it. It's fantastic. Now, I'm not being paid to say this. I didn't meet Chris until today. I'm not his agent. I know nothing about publishing and books. But I've been, like all of us, trying to educate myself because it's very important in this area. And so I've been reading scientific information. I have been reading workplace information and inclusion information, and I've gotten a little bit smarter. But I learned so much in the past week reading this book about this journey. And it's funny, and it's enlightening, and it's inspirational, and it's courageous. And I'm going to finish reading the book, and then I'm going to give it to someone. And I suggest everybody who's listening today, go buy a copy, and then read it, and you'll love it, and you'll learn so much more about what this is all about, and then give it to someone that you like, who also needs to learn. So typically we leave you with a relevant resource when we close a dialogue, and today we have something special for a few lucky winners. So look under your seat. If you find a sticky that says book winner, you've won a book, and you can pick it up in the back. All right. All right. So Thank you, everybody. Go in peace. Continue to learn. Thank you.